So with that, I will kick it off here. So as I mentioned at the top of this half hour here, for this presentation today, we'll be kind of going through just briefly kind of what we've heard, some what we've done so far, engagement activities over the last year or so. Then we'll kind of be walking through the recommended layout for the project, focusing on a few kind of focus areas on this part of Grand Avenue that we spent a little extra time and effort getting a little more data and input and design on that. Then we'll be moving over to looking at the upcoming schedule and letting folks know what to expect moving forward from today. So with that said, I will kick it off. So real quick, here we go. Real quick, I want to remind everyone what the project extent for this Grand Avenue reconstruction is next year. So it will run from Fairview Avenue to Snelling Avenue. It'll include a full reconstruction that includes all roadways, sidewalks, boulevard space, and all utilities below the street as well. That'll all be replaced and updated with this project. We also have, as I noted here, we have a addition to this project since the original scope is we've got some money from MnDOT through a grant that we applied for to do some geometric changes and signal replacement on the Snelling Avenue intersection as well. Hello, thanks for joining. Just getting this presentation kicked off, so you haven't really missed anything. So I'm gonna jump right back into it. So over the past couple months, the engagement really kicked off in earnest about almost a year ago in March of 2022. And from that, we've been going through engagement, multiple rounds, multiple events all over the community, talking about Grand Avenue, talking about folks' vision and desires for a future of Grand Avenue, and also looking at some location options, which we will review in a moment as well. So through this process, we've done really major engagement activity occurred from March to November of last year, multiple meetings with corridor stakeholders. So we've identified Macalester College as a major stakeholder, Hidden River Junior High, Metro Transit as a Route 63 bus runs down Grand Avenue, MnDOT as MnDOT currently owns and operates Snelling Avenue, and the Macalester Groveland District Council. Over the last year, we've had two previous open houses, one in June and then a following one in September of last year. Today will be the third one in February of 2023. We've also attended many public events and held some events in conjunction with Macalester. Are guests coming in here? Hello there. And then we've also held many public events and also attended many events over the past year. We've held a couple events at Macalester College, 2 events held at the college itself. We've attended 3 other events on campus. Held a pop-up event on Grand Avenue where we went and talked to businesses and also users of the street during that time. We've had we attended Mac Grove Fest in September. We've attended multiple Hidden River parent-teacher organization meetings and their parent-teacher conference, talked to parents and students. And finally, we attended the Mac Groveland Annual Business Roundtable, which is held that the Mac Groveland District Council holds annually as well. In addition to that kind of in-person engagement activities we've held over the last year, held multiple surveys and included some interactive mapping features. The first round of surveys, which included kind of more questions about how people use the street today and kind of how that impacts and affects their day-to-day lives and what they'd like to see in the future. That one got a lot of response. We got almost 500 responses from that first round of surveys. And the second round of surveys, which included location options and having the public weigh in on some of those, got relatively fewer responses, so about 70 responses from that second round. However, we did quite a few more in-person events during that second round to kind of flesh that out a little bit more. And throughout these first 2 rounds of engagement, we've talked to we talked to almost nearly 1,000 members of the public and corridor stakeholders throughout this process. And so we feel we've got a pretty good idea of what the public is looking for in a reconstructed Grand Avenue. So next, I'm going to kind of go through the location options, which were presented in November of last year and kind of had the public weigh in on those. And we'll kind of go in and see what the public thought about each of these location options and other kind of reasonings why we went with one location or the other. And then finally, when we get to that layout process, we'll kind of elaborate more on kind of some of that reasoning for these design choices here. So the first option here that we presented to the public was for the Fairview Avenue intersection. Really, the options here were if to install bump outs or curb extensions, as they're technically called, or not. And so, as we see here, the public feedback was very much in favor of installing those bump outs, which reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians and increase safety for all users of the intersections. And so, And as you can see, Matt Groveland District Council also recommended the bump out option. And then one other note here that we also want to look at too, and we're kind of looking at some of these design options, is kind of what the crash history is of this intersection. And unfortunately, Fairview Avenue intersection is one of the few intersections on Grand Avenue that actually has seen a pedestrian fatality in the last 10 years. And so there was a fatality here in 2015 and also a pedestrian injury here in 2017. And so when we're thinking about kind of design choices, that kind of data is something that really impacts what we do on our designs. And again, really helping us lead us towards a safer design. Next, we wanted to look at options of potentially installing medians on Grand Avenue, specifically on parts of the corridor where you don't have left turning needs. So that wouldn't be that area between Cambridge and Macalester, more of those areas between Fairview and Cambridge Street. So the first option was kind of looking at, no median, essentially keeping the street today with the same look as it is today. Option two would be potentially looking to install a landscape median, so think tree plantings and grass. And the option three would look at a hardscape median, so think just a hard curb surface with potentially some lighting features along that as well. Public feedback was generally in support of a landscape median. However, the options. Sorry about that. However, the preferences were not in great majority here. About 57% preferred that landscape median, and about 34% that preferred no median. Matt Groveland District Council recommended no median option through this section here. Crash data was really showing that the safety issues really aren't present mid-block throughout this corridor of Grand Avenue. We saw a few crashes with vehicles over a 10-year period, just 7, so that's less than 1 year. And we saw one single bike incident over the past 10 years as well. So crash data really wasn't something that we were concerned about here through this mid-block section here. But there was other considerations that we really want to take into account when we kind of decided about what we're going with on this option here for the medians. One was ongoing maintenance. Median costs are cost the city money in ongoing maintenance, whether that's tree trimming, landscape maintenance, other items like that. And so that definitely is an increase in costs that our maintenance department is not necessarily totally in favor of taking on with their limited resources today. Installation costs were also a factor as well. Adding more curbing and more features like that, like a median through the feature, will certainly increase the installation costs as well. Another issue that was brought up through engagement here was also maneuverability, specifically on emergency services vehicles. So if we had a median here with a full parking lane and just a single through lane, that would really certainly limit the maneuverability of emergency vehicles from getting down Grand Avenue at all and vehicles getting out of their way. Additionally, there would potentially be issues with stalled vehicles or stopped vehicles blocking traffic as well through this section if a median was installed. So these are some of those considerations we took when we looked at that options there. Looking at that Cambridge Street intersection option, so as we know, Hidden River Junior High is located on the north west corner of Cambridge Street here. So one of these options, we want to kind of dive in a little more with a few more potential options for Cambridge Street to really maximize the safety of students getting to and from school. First option is kind of our typical idea of what a unsignalized intersection would look like, with just those curb extensions or bump outs in each quadrant of the intersection. Option two was looking at a partial intersection median, which you can see here, which would be installed on that western crossing for students. Then option three would be looking at a full intersection median, which would essentially close that median to close Cambridge to through traffic, but allow bike traffic to filter through. Matt Groveland District Council recommended option two, that partial median. As we see here, public feedback was generally in favor of option three. However, option two was the second most favored, and option one also received a significant share of those responses as well at 23%. Additionally, here, just looking at some crash data. So we do have, this is one of the more frequent crash intersections actually on Grand Avenue. Over the last 10 years, we saw 4 pedestrian crashes and 2 of those resulting in injuries. Finally, one of the final options we wanted to have the public weigh on was Macalester College and kind of the pedestrian crossing mid-block here through campus here. So the first option we wanted to give this out here as an option is just leave as is with those necessary improvements. So today these crossings are not accessible for people with disability, and so option one would be looking at adding those accessibility options, but really not changing the function of the crossings as they are today. Option two would be looking at meeting a CIB request that we received a few years ago through the CIB process, which would be looking at installing a wider legal crossing in front of the dorms on the western end of the block while leaving the other two crossings as is. Option 3 was looking at improving and consolidating crosses, so creating two legal crossings while consolidating and removing that center crossing in the middle. Option 4 was looking at potentially a large-scale centerpiece legal crossing, so all three crossings would be consolidated into one large center crossing. And then option 5 was looking at potentially raising up and actually tabling that entire stretch here of the crossings, so you consolidate two crossings, remove the middle one, but actually raise those crossings for pedestrians across at grade. Public feedback was not a majority on any one options. However, option 5 saw nearly a majority at 47%, which would be that raised and tabled feature. The Mac Groveland District Council recommended a raised crossing, but no specific option on how those crossings would be put together. Now that we kind of reviewed a little bit about what we reviewed over the last couple of months here, we're going to move into the recommended design. First, we'll kind of look at some overall features of it, the design, and then we'll kind of go block by block to look how that looks on a layout view. So this design here for Grand Avenue is really something that is consistent with multiple city policies, specifically the comprehensive plan and the pedestrian plan, which are both really policy documents that are driving us to create a more pedestrian-friendly and multimodal city. And so with this plan, we're looking to increase space for pedestrians and greenery while not impacting parking at all. So curb to curb width will be narrowed for about 55 feet today to 48 feet in the proposed design, which would be about a 7-foot roadway width reduction. We're able to do that because today the existing width of the roadway from curb to curb is much wider than is what we really need to kind of accommodate all these functions. So with that reduction, we're still able to have our typical 11-foot through traffic lanes, which will be narrower from the existing, but typical of what we do on reconstruction projects. We're looking to maintain that 10-foot left turn lane as is today. And then we're looking to narrow the parking lanes to 8 feet, which is also a typical sizing for projects that we do today as well. So we're able to kind of maintain all that space for vehicles while also giving back significant space to pedestrians. So that total non-vehicle space will be widened from about 25 feet between both sides of the street today to about 32 feet. So adding about 7 feet or about 3.5 feet on both sides of the street. It'll look like a 10-foot boulevard along both sides of the street, which will be widened from the existing 6 feet, and also a 6-foot sidewalk will be maintained in residential areas, so areas in front of apartments or single-family homes, but will be widened to 8 feet in those high pedestrian traffic areas. Typically, those areas are where you find your more commercial businesses, or your situations like in Macalester, where you have large school, where you have a lot of students walking around, a lot of customers walking around. So we're looking to create a much more comfortable environment for pedestrians to be able to maneuver and walk comfortably through the space, and also be able to accommodate cafe seating, product display from businesses along the corridor as well. We're looking to improve pedestrian safety throughout the project. We're looking to install those curb extensions or bump outs at all intersections where we can. The Cambridge Street intersection, we're looking to install a pedestrian crossing on. We'll look what that looks like in a moment. And then finally, we're looking to install raised and legal crossings at Macalester College to better accommodate student crossing needs. So what this looks like in a cross-section view. So this is kind of essentially if you cut down the street down the middle and look at it, straight up. This is kind of how it looked like laid out in visual form rather than word form. See those 11-foot through lanes, that 10-foot center turn lane, those 8-foot parking lanes. Then you finally have your 10-foot buffer, which is your boulevard space, and your 6-foot walk space. How this would look in a typical bump out cross section is in the lower left here. So it'll be about 36 feet to cross for pedestrians from curb to curb, which is significantly less than what it is today at about 55 feet. You see you've got extra space for your bump outs here, your curb extensions, and your sidewalk space as well. And then finally, on the bottom right here is how a cross section will look for at Cambridge Street, where you have that additional crossing feature for the students getting to and from school, where you see that center turn lane median is now a raised crossing median. Now we'll look at the layout and see how that looks kind of from top down here, and I'll kind of walk block to block. So first, we got Fairview Avenue here, where you see those proposed bump outs, curb extensions at each quadrant here, again, significantly narrowing that crossing distance for pedestrians from today at 55 feet to this feature, which will be at 36 feet. Moving through here, you can see that widened boulevard space. You can see Wheeler Street here, which also has, again, those four quadrant curb extensions, which will be nearing that crossing distance for pedestrians and serving as traffic calming too for motor vehicles moving through here. Moving further east, we're looking here at Cambridge Street. I will zoom in on Cambridge Street to talk a little bit more about that. So Cambridge Street here is a unique situation. This is an area where we have an active junior high with many students coming, walking and biking to school during those months where it's most appropriate. So during typical fall and fall and spring school sessions. And so the reasoning here, thinking about this kind of intersection here is, so we really wanted to make the pedestrians on that west side, so those students getting to and from school, we really want to maximize the safety for them to get to and from school. And so the design here shows a center median being converted into a crossing median, a crossing island, pedestrian crossing island, that allows students to really do a two-stage crossing so they can cross one direction of travel, they can stop, they can wait, and they can cross that second second direction of travel separately and kind of increase their safety, increase their awareness, increase their visibility too as pedestrians moving through here for vehicles to see and yield to them as they're making their crossing. Some additional data we also collected here to really help, I think, drive thinking about this crossing treatment here is that we saw a pretty significant difference between crossings on east and west leg of the crossing. So the west leg today, where that additional infrastructure will be installed, saw about 4 times the crossings in a typical day, 400 to 100, and about 4 times the peak hour as well, about 88 in that peak hour at 3 p.m., which coincides with school getting out of session, a lot of students walking across, getting back home. Another reason why we wanted to look at additional kind of measures here to install at this intersection is, again, as I mentioned, this is one of the higher crash concentrations for pedestrians on Grand Avenue, actually, over the last 10 years. And so looking at enhanced kind of improvements here to kind of ensure that safe crossing of pedestrians here is pretty vital. Again, we got that high student crossing pattern for that 88 in the peak hour. And we also saw some modest bike crossings here. So Cambridge Street is actually identified as a bike boulevard on our plan. And so we saw about 72 bikes cross here through a typical day, typical warmer summer day. I doubt it's that high today. However, we're looking at those bike crossings here as well. Another reason why we thought it was appropriate to close that left turn lane and convert that into a crossing island here, as you can see here, is we also counted kind of those turning counts going from eastbound Grand onto Cambridge Street here, and they really were pretty low. We only saw about 94 left turns taken in a single day, with about a fifth of those turns actually associated with parent and student or student pickup and drop off for parents at the parking lot up here. Working with Hidden River Junior High, there actually will be actually rearranging that pickup and drop off kind of operations and shifting that further north. And so we actually think these left turn counts would actually decrease with those changes that Hidden River will be doing on their project in the next couple of years as well. So kind of with those ideas here, we thought it was appropriate that we could be able to close that left turn lane and to convert that to a pedestrian crossing island. A little more information on this crossing island here. We've heard some feedback that some folks think that northern lane width at about 19 feet is a little too wide and could cause issues. However, looking at some additional data and some additional examples from around the metro, it seems to be something that is kind of in line with what we see in a lot of other areas that see pedestrian median islands, and also those safety increases from those islands. So as you can see here, we've got studies that show about 36% reduction in pedestrian crashes from refuge islands themselves. That's pretty significant reduction in crashes. And also we see here a couple examples. This is in Minneapolis on 28th Avenue in front of Roosevelt High School here. A similar kind of treatment was installed here where they installed the pedestrian crossing island for those students to get across the street from the high school here. And from observations made here, that seems to work pretty well, especially at school opening and closing, as those volumes of pedestrians increases and traffic generally seems to work pretty well here and a pretty safe kind of intersection and working here though. One more issue that was brought up potentially too is there is an issue with some folks have with median design and how the curb lines are tapered for plow operations. However, that's more of a maintenance issue, and I think that is a topic for another day. One other point here we also want to make is one of the reasons why we didn't include this curb extension here on that northern area, reducing that crossing distance, is because of the need to be accommodating school bus turning movements here. Obviously, Cambridge has school buses pick up and drop off. Today they pick up and drop off on Summit Avenue, or that on the north side here. However, we have been discussing with them about potentially utilizing some of Grand to for those purposes, and so we do want to be able to make sure that school buses can make that turn. And so, as you can see here, we ran a turning template just to understand what this would look like and confirm that yes, we would need that entire space to accommodate those bus turning movements. And so that is one of the reasons why we did not include that northern curve extension here for this intersection. Moving forward, looking at this, the block between Cambridge and Macalester Street, this is the block where we see the most retail and commercial activity. We've got a pretty intact old streetcar kind of set up here with a lot of retail shops and restaurants and cafes. And so as you can see here, that sidewalk space expanded to 8 feet, that boulevard space at 8 feet really gives you about 16 feet of room to for wider cafe dining, for more product display, for more comfortable pedestrian walking through this area as well. Now, looking forward, one more on the last block here. This last block is going to be probably the one that most folks are interested in. This is the Macalester campus block here between Snelling and Macalester Street. So really looking back at some of that feedback we got from residents and students and other users of the street, really looking at improving and kind of emphasizing pedestrian safety getting across the street here was something that we really wanted to emphasize and look at identifying here. And really those raised crossings is something that we really have decided with the public that this is the way to go forward. So a raised crossing, well, it'll be a 3D image of what this looks like in a second, but a raised crossing is essentially the street comes up to the sidewalk level. So pedestrians, as they cross, they no longer have to go into the street to cross. They got a straight kind of flat surface, and the vehicles have to come up and come back down, almost like a speed bump in a way. But they're a little different in the fact that they're actually crossings and they're wider, and they actually provide a pretty safe and pretty easy path for everyone to utilize this here. These crossings would also be legalized, and they would be requiring vehicles to yield at them. And you can see here also that middle crossing would be closed as well to consolidate into those two outer crossings. A little more additional information on why this alignment was chosen. One of the things that we've heard initial feedback is the width of the street of the travel lanes kind of through the mid block here at about 14 feet. Some thought they were a little wider than they maybe need to be. However, this 14 feet is kind of continuing on what we've already had there in place since 2008 with the median project and with Macalester. And really this 14 feet is kind of the minimum we can do for a kind of a design like this with a large center median and just a single travel lane. We need that extra couple feet for what we call curb reaction distance. So that's where your curb and your concrete goes at the edge. And so when you include those for both the median and the outer curb of the cross section here, you actually get about 11 foot for your actual travel lane, with those about 2 feet and 1 foot for those curb reaction zones. So that is pretty typical of kind of a design here, and something really the minimum we can go for at this area of school here. But looking at kind of why we went with maybe these two legal raised crossings, this additional treatment here to kind of identify for pedestrians here. One of the biggest drivers here is just the pedestrian volumes crossing the street. So we did a pedestrian study. We counted every person kind of crossing Grand Avenue mid block during a typical school day, and we saw nearly 5,000 crossings between the three. So that's 1,800 at that one closest to Snelling, another 1,900 at the one closest to Macalester, and finally just under 1,000 at that center crossing here. So really some of the highest pedestrian crossing counts in the city. I haven't seen crossing counts this high. And so really this leads us to a unique situation where these volumes, the way Grand Avenue interacts with campus, means these mid-block crossings are likely going to happen no matter what we do. So I've heard people asking if we could close all these crossings and have students go to the intersections to make those crossings. And I just don't really think that's something that's realistic to expect those 5,000 crossings to all be moving to those intersections and then coming back onto campus again. And so really looking at accommodating these existing flows and making sure that these that these crossings are consistent and reliable, that we know exactly where they're going to be taking place, that we know, we know who has the right of way at these crossings, and we know how these crossings work for everybody's, for both drivers and for pedestrians. And a little additional information too that we also found was interesting was working with Macalester. They're doing a campus master plan here, and this little image on the right here with these gray lines kind of shows the walking patterns of students and faculty and staff through campus. And you can see here those two outer crossings definitely, again, see those most crossings. And so when we're thinking about potentially closing one of these crossings, that center crossing was the one that seemed to be the least used, doesn't really have any destination on the other side, and so those crossings can reasonably be accommodated at those two outer ones. Additionally, another data point that came from this campus master plan is really visitors, students, faculty, residents really see Grand Avenue as an entry point for Macalester College and the campus there. And then an overlap here is they also see it as one of the most unlikable areas of campus as well. You can see that point of entry and that unlikable moments for a pretty clear overlap here of kind of an entry point that is really not functioning, I think, as most people would desire. And so the intention of this idea here, this design here, is to create more of a campus feeling, a gateway for campus as you move across Grand Avenue, and really to improve those situations that we have been finding as unlikable moments with pedestrians crossing. Real quick here, I'm going to show a quick 3D rendering. It's sometimes hard to visualize what this could look like from a top-down view, and so we wanted to put together a quick little 3D rendering of what these raised crossings could look like on campus with those additional widening features and legalized and features here. So you can see here we're looking at the eastern end. We're moving over to the eastern end here, close to Snelling. This would be your eastern crossing, your western crossing over there. See the bus stop here. We can see other design features and kind of see that more in that 3D view here. So this video is on our project webpage. If you'd like to look at it again, it is on our project webpage. You can certainly check that out again. So just give people a little visual representation of what this could look like in 3 dimensions. Also, real quick, I want to talk about specifically raised crossings and potentially, what these could look like on Grand Avenue. So there are multiple raised crossings which have been installed at other locations within St. Paul. As you can see here, Maria Avenue. Actually, this is in on the Metro State campus. That kind of goes with their main building to their main parking facilities and other facilities on one end here. So a similar situation where you've got a lot of pedestrians moving mid-block and crossing mid-block. And so a similar kind of treatment was designed here to add a raised feature to really accommodate those crossings the best that you can. Johnson Parkway is another project that we recently completed that has raised crossings. If you've biked or walked down the new trail facility on Johnson Parkway here, you can see those as well. And also Wabasha Street is another larger project where we've seen a raised crossing feature installed that was installed last year. A few examples here of other areas where we've seen raised crossings installed. So raised crossings really have been installed on other high traffic corridors at unique locations as well. On the top left here, we've got Commonwealth Avenue in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. This is right in front of the state capitol, Pennsylvania. So you've got that on the left, and you've got a large park here. You've got a raised crossing that runs in between those two. This is Harrison Street on the top right in Chicago, Illinois. So this is on the University of Illinois Chicago campus and connects to the Blue Line metro station. And so you see here, you got a similar raised crossing feature connecting campus to another side, a high traffic area here. Just to keep looking at some more examples here, again, as we kind of think about this, how this kind of visually works in other places. On the top left, we have Vassar Street on the MIT campus in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Similar idea, we've got large dorm facilities. We've got a lot of areas, destinations that our students are going to, and you've got a raised cross here to accommodate that. Lime Street in Lakeland, Florida. You've got a large convention center on one side, and you've got a large parking facility. Again, a raised crossing here to better accommodate those large pedestrian flows one way or the other. River Road, actually, in Minneapolis, over on the U of M campus, actually does also have a raised crossing here. This connects the river to the main East Bank campus here, as you can see right there. And then finally, another example here I'd like to show is Prospect Street on the Yale campus in New Haven, Connecticut. Again, you've got large dorms on one side, and you've got other school facilities on the other side. So you've got these kind of raised features to slow traffic down and to calm traffic and to make crossing these streets easier for pedestrians. Now, looking forward from today, so we've cleared that phase 2 engagement in November. We'll look at those layout options, and we're now moving on to the preferred concept, and we're moving on to construction design. We held an in-person event yesterday at Macalester College. We've got a pretty good turnout. We got about 30 or 40 people who showed up and chatted about this project in person at Macalester College. And today we have the virtual open house version of that. But moving forward here, we'll be moving into final design and construction design over the next year, and over the next 2 years. So city staff will begin creating construction designs this year. We will also be beginning that MnDOT review of these designs in this year as well. And then finally, moving to project construction in 2024. Construction will probably likely run the full construction season from May to November 24. Likely in phases. We do have those big users like Macalester College and Hidden River that will likely need to be coordinating with to make sure that the impacts on their operations are as minimal as possible through the construction. How that looks at the end of the day, that is still to be seen, but that is certainly something that we are already thinking about and preparing for, and making sure that we accommodate those users through this potentially difficult construction process as well. If there's any further questions or comments, you can certainly send them to me or my partners in street design, who will be working on the actual construction designs as we move forward, and they will be kind of taking over the project from me following this point in the project. However, with that said, we're all here today, so if I would like to open it up to any questions, comments from those who are attending here, and feel free to speak your mind and we can have a little discussion. But I do want to say that all the visuals I've been showing today, they are on the project website. I can actually show those to you while we are here. So real quick, we'll walk through the project. So the project website, project details, obviously we're here to get to the meeting, so we know that. But we have the layout, which you can find here. We've got the 3D rendering video. Okay, I'm glad you found that, Isabel. That's good. And then of course, we've got more documents here. We've got the project documents include that layout. We include some other additional information for specific areas of the project. We've got some project maps, which give a little more information as well. And finally, you got engagement materials, which includes the open house presentation from today, engagement summary, and some other presentations kind of through the line. So if you want to kind of track how this progressed through from last March to today, you can kind of do that through these various recordings and presentation slides. Well, if there's no questions or comments, certainly that is the end of the presentation. So I can, if you feel like getting off, you can certainly do that. I thank everyone who showed up here tonight to review this layout with us today, and looking forward to getting this built next year. And thanks again.